I remember when I was young, I used to sit with my dad every once in a while when he listened to a shortwave radio. That thing picked up stations from all around the world. And every once in a while, something unusually interesting would be reported. Sometimes you'd even hear it twice. And we'd sit and we'd wait and wait for an expanded update. But usually, we would never ever hear it again. It would just disappear so completely as to make me question whether or not I'd even really heard it the first time. But then I grew up, got married, I moved to LA, and I had a baby. I also had newspaper delivery and cable TV. And, since I was an at-home mom, a friend of ours bought me a computer. He thought I should be a writer. And so a few days later, I got on the internet. And a couple of days after that, I found the land of the lost story. I also found the other side, the reverse angle, the rumors and innuendo. I found, it seemed, the exact opposite of everything else I was hearing, everything that my husband believed, and that I had almost stopped to question. Who were these people, these writers and photographers, chroniclers and commentators, keepers of conspiracies and debunkers of conventional beliefs? Were they just paranoids? People with too much time and willing keyboards? Were they really destructive liars, faceless members of some vast right-wing conspiracy? That's what my husband believed. And that's what I'd been told to believe. But hey, when the year is 1999 and you have a child to raise and you value the truth, well, sometimes some things are actually worth investigating. Urban legend and conspiracy fodder numero uno, Area 51, a rumored top-secret installation in the middle of Nevada, and therefore, not one of the easiest places to find. Now we have to go to Area 51. Nobody knows where it is. In fact, I asked the guy, he says, no, I don't think it's a real place.
Yes, it is. And it's about 80 miles north from here.
North on what highway?
You have to use 95.
Okay.
After you go to Reno, you know. Get up 95, pass Indian Springs, pass Betty. Betty's about 50 miles. Then 30 more miles. That's where the Area 51 is.
And it's right there on I-95.
Yeah, but it's down behind the mountains right there.
Right.
So there's no way to get in over there because there is a guard, you know.
There's a guard, but are there signs and fences and...
It's only said, don't trespass. That's what it said.
Describe a curiosity about the base.
Well, I grew up in the Highland Park district of Los Angeles, which is about 4 or 5 miles from what is now Hollywood Burbank Airport. It used to be Lockheed, and that used to be their Skunk Works plant back then, and that's where they were building their state-of-the-art aircraft that were being tested over here. So that's where I heard about this general region, not anything real specific other than there was a place called Groom Lake out here, and it was a hellhole for the workers because there was nothing to do and it was hot, but they were testing aircraft, and I've always been interested in aircraft, so I've always been fascinated. Plus the fact that they deny that it's here adds to the mystery.
Now they still don't deny it's here.
They still officially deny that it's here. A little over 2 years ago, they went to the trouble of planning a story that although it's never officially been here, It's been closed down and moved from here now. In the June 1997 issue by Jim Wilson, the science editor of Popular Mechanics. He came out here in January of that year late. I spoke with him here at the end. And, he said that I have a source at the Pentagon that's told me that everything has been moved. And I informed him that that was incorrect because I'd been keeping track of activities. And he told me where he was going to go, and I said, well, if you want to go out there, go ahead. That has really nothing to do with Area 51. It's a bombing range boundary. It's about 8 miles from where you want to be. But I don't want to discourage you, go ahead. But take this little side trip, and I gave him specific times and things that he'd see. And I assumed that he'd do that. He actually used a couple of my photos in his article, which we'd agreed to before he left, but then he contacted me later. And then he sends me an advance copy of the magazine along with the check and my photos back. And he'd ignored everything I told him. He hadn't checked it out. He wrote it like, there's no guards around, none of this is there, it's all been moved. And if he'd have been standing in the middle of the road at about 3:40 by the boundary, he would have been run over by the worker bus. You don't get to be a science editor without checking out things that you're told, especially when somebody makes it that simple for
Right.
you. But I was told that he'd published something that he might have gotten into trouble with over national security on another matter, and basically they held that over his head, threatened prosecution,
Right.
and said, we want you to run this story. And so they gave him the story they wanted it, and he did it under his byline. As the story goes, the U.S. government came into possession of an advanced technology in the desert outside of Roswell in 1947. Certainly at that time, we're a year and a half out of World War II. We're within a few miles of where the nuclear bomb was developed. Certainly there would be a national security issue because they wouldn't know how to treat this, and they'd treat it as a potential enemy initially, and then there'd be a good reason for secrecy.
We don't know what happened, but we know something happened. The thing that all of us around here are convinced of is that something happened in 47 they've been lying about since. Military cover-up. One day they announced it, the next day they said it was weather balloons, and all that sort of thing. So what I'm saying is, you probably haven't had that much experience with the government, but they'll lie to anybody, anytime in the folly of national security. See, oh, it's national security, bang, bang, we don't want you to see. And it means just that to them.
Over 50 years has transpired now, and we're not much closer. And for a while there was a legitimate need to keep things secret, and then I think they're doing everybody a disservice, and maybe doing themselves a disservice by keeping everything secret to this day. This much time has passed. If these things presented some hostile front to us, I don't imagine we'd be here having this conversation after all that time.
He's gonna help on the way, ma'am. Do we know where he's at? I'm sorry. Do we know where he's at? Okay. He's upstairs. He's right outside of here. He's outside? He's outside of the hall. Outside of the hall? Outside of the hall? Okay. He's got the kids there? Outside. He's in the library. On the side. We're gonna stay on the side. Is there any way you can lock the doors? Smoke is coming in from out there. Shots fired at Columbine High School, 16201 South Piers. Possibly at the south lower line towards 60.
No other 1999 event served to separate the mainstream media from the independent press quite like the April 20th horror, which took place in Littleton, Colorado.
He talked to me all the time. He was nice to me, so was they were both really nice.
So what happened?
They just had something wrong.
Well, I think it's ridiculous that they're trying to, everyone's trying to blame it on the video games like Doom and everything else the kids are playing. You act on your own judgments.
That's not right.
They're well within age.
But I mean,
There's
you can
millions
still be influenced by video games. Anything that you see in life is very influential.
These two young men, first of all, were certainly influenced by video games and such of a horrible, bloody, fiendish nature. But
there's millions of kids in the United States that play those games, and the fact that they blame the game for two kids doing something stupid out of millions.
We have a culture in which the music and the music, the entertainment, the film industry, television. I'm not trying to lay it all off on them. It sounds like more of the breast beating and hair pulling, which I can't do too well. But there is a, what would you call it? We have glorified gore.
TV, television, Channel 2 News, Channel 13 News, police, cops, everything that's on TV. It all has violence. It all has violence.
We have glorified the angry young man and angry young woman to the point where everybody wants to be the angry young man and angry young woman.
I mean, they had a guy on Channel 9 News. He'd called the cops before, said this guy's been threatening to kill me, and the cops didn't really follow through with it. The cops, I think they could have done a lot more. They could have prevented it totally.
They were brought to psychiatrists. They were given mind-controlled drugs.
He
My
was building
parents
the
know
pipe bombs in his
everything
garage.
that I have in my house. They know everything that's in my room. They know what I do. They're supposed to do that.
And he had the blueprints on the wall and everything. I mean, the cops could have easily, one time, gone in there and seen the blueprints for the bombs. And smart enough to say, this kid's making bombs here. Find the bombs and they could prevent it if they'd have actually taken someone seriously.
Now, I think it's not outrageous to ask, how could these two young men have planted 32 bombs in that school all by themselves?
Everyone believes that they totally acted alone.
No,
with just the two
not
of
at all.
them. Not at all.
Not at all, because I mean,
There was a lot of stuff that was said.
How are they going to carry those many propane
Thank
bombs
God.
into the school? How are they going to do all that?
You have to have more than two people to plan all this stuff and to get all the weapons and stuff they had.
Well, they
and
they steal backpacks and plant bombs in other students' backpacks, and they go to pick them up or go running. Their backpack would explode.
Why is it that a teacher was allowed over hours to bleed to death with the exact knowledge they had the authorities on the phone? They said, come save him. He's here in this room. He's bleeding to death. Is that not what police are paid to do? I was in the Air Force for 20 years, over 20 years. And I was told there may come a time when you will have to go places and do things and perhaps sacrifice your life. And you will do it. And if you're not willing to do it, get out. You get out of uniform. These people were law enforcement officers. They're also trained. They're trained with SWAT teams. What have we spent millions of dollars for our law enforcement to do? Go in and protect the innocent, the vulnerable. They should have gone in the building. They were held off by the federal authorities for hours on end, unable to go in there, knowing these two men. Actually, they didn't know how many they claimed. How many men are in there with guns, killing hundreds of school kids and teachers? They didn't know, but they said, we'll just stay out here where it's safe and let all of the murders and the horrible things transpire inside the school. And then after hours are spent, maybe they run out of shells out of killing, massacring hundreds, then we'll go in.
Yeah, it sounds really intense. It's kind of an operation.
Well, there are rumors that there's a third shooter. I really believe there was. I think, and I thought I knew who did it, and then that person was apprehended and then released.
An FBI psychologist was assigned to Littleton, Colorado, beginning about 2 years before this incident. And it just so happens that his own son was going to this school. And his son was 1 year ahead. In other words, he graduated 1 year ahead of Klebold and Harris. It just so happens that his son joined the trench coat mafia and actually assisted Harris and Klebold in this video that they produced, which right there in the school helped them, you might say, even graded them on their efforts. They created a video, as you know, from what we're told in the media, which showed these kids coming in, blasting and killing people right there in the school, going down the hallway, mowing people down and such, which is exactly what they did later.
Well, they were in the video class.
Right.
And they were doing special effects graphics. And what they did is on Independence Day, you know, when UFO shoots a beam down and the White House blows up,
Right.
they did the same thing, but they did it over the school.
Interestingly enough, it was an FBI agent's son, who was a year older than them, who assisted them. Now, he graduated from school and went on. Now, this very FBI agent was assigned to the case. He, in fact, is the FBI agent in charge of the Littleton incident.
I had no idea who would do this. Obviously, you can't tell who would do it. I know a lot of people. I didn't count one person that I thought would do it.
Right.
And it ended up being someone I knew that I thought would do it. You can't tell.
Anyone here in your group seen a shooter? I did. We did. We heard big gunshots, and I said it was gunshots, and Heather was like, no, it wasn't, and then she got up, and then I got up, and we walked over there, we saw three guys with guns. We saw a really tall guy in a black trench coat, and then we saw two girls on the ground. She was on the ground, she had blood all over her, and then another girl helped her, and then after that we just ran.
We as Americans especially we love a good conspiracy theory. We just love it. If we can't find one, we'll create one. So at the drop of a hat, we'll create. Not to say that conspiracies don't exist. I wouldn't believe that for a moment either. But I say we go way out of our way to create ones or make bigger ones out of small ones. Or who knows?
What if there wasn't coincidence theory? You wouldn't have to replace it with conspiracy theory or anything sinister like that. But coincidence theory just doesn't hold up.
Whether it's Oklahoma or whether it's Littleton, it's strange how these things tend to surface when we're in anticipation of specific legislation that people are trying to propose. That's what feeds the conspiracy buffs with all kinds of bizarre views.
Now, a lot of people say that the National Guard has replaced what was the militia.
That's not exactly true. There is still a state militia. They're a fairly well-organized organization. We don't have any specific ties to them. But I think, again, the public gets confused when they think of the militia that they see in Oklahoma and Ohio and some of these other areas, and the militia when it's discussed in North Carolina. Because like I said, we've got a very well-organized militia, and in fact, a couple of the leaders I've known personally, and are ex-military personnel, and are in it for the good of mankind.
The whole gun ownership thing is a much more complex question, and it's tragic that these interests prey upon the naivete of the American people to use the incidents like Littleton to promote that. Just as they did at Oklahoma City, the Mura office building thing, there's never been a connection between the principals that were charged with that and the militias. But within an hour, they were hammering the militias that they were used propaganda-wise. And the real tragedy isn't the corruption of the media so much as the naivete and the illiteracy in the American people, that they are so used to being spoon-fed rather than doing their own thinking, rather than doing their own homework.
Every time some idiot picks up a gun and does something stupid, some other idiot, under the guise of some intellectual suit mentality, jumps up and starts screaming, outlaw, 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 outlaw everything, outlaw guns, outlaw bullets, outlaw, hey. We live in a violent society here. This is a very violent society. The United States is probably one of the most violent societies on the planet. Now, there are some that are much more. If we didn't have guns, we would use baseball bats. And if they outlawed baseball bats, we would use rocks. It's... The gun just happens to be the weapon of choice.
In fact, the statistics show that where there is a high level of gun ownership and where there's a high level of permits to carry, one of the interesting things people do when they look at counties to go move to, they check the records to see how many permits to carry a concealed weapon have been issued by the sheriffs in those areas. And you'll notice there's an inverse correlate where there's lots of permits to carry, there's very little crime.
I personally believe that there are legitimate reasons that an individual should be given the opportunity or permission to carry a concealed weapon. There are requirements for that. The restrictions that are placed on purchasing guns right now, I think are a good thing. I don't think you'll find a law-abiding citizen be overly concerned about having to wait for 3 days or a week if he wants to purchase a weapon. The people that you're going to find concerned are those people that I think that are of questionable character and want to buy one right now to do something with.
And the issue is, are we for self-defense or not? The idea that you somehow can legislate morality, the idea that you somehow can create legislation that will avoid the bad guys from getting guns is naive.
I can go out here in the corner. I can go out here on the street within 15 minutes, buy half a dozen guns. Cheaper than I can at a gun shop without any questions asked. Now, that's what we need to correct.
Now, if someone passes a gun, the background check, should they be registered? Do you think every gun owner should be registered?
Registered with whom?
With the government,
with the federal
with
government?
with some kind of a central federal database. Do you think everyone should be registered in that? Do you think that's necessary? Do you think that's something that should be left up to the states?
I think the states could probably handle that reasonably well.
If you go back and look at the Constitution, everybody interprets the Constitution in the United States a different way. They're trying to impose gun control on us. They want to take our weapons away from the private citizens because they say, you know, gun control, gun control. And they tell us that the Constitution of the United States says that we were never promised having weapons in our home, only for hunting and whatever.
The gun control thing, to me, is not that, doesn't seem that controversial. In my mind, it's part of a broader tide of power grabs, trying to increase the control of the elite.
I was a cop for 11 years. Old-time cops all say, what are you, crazy? You should have a gun. Young cops that are trained differently and taught differently and came up under this different coddle system. Oh no, only the police should have a gun. By the way, if you call us in a large city, we can get there within 2 hours. Duh!
I don't know what this country, what these people in this country, these people, they want the government to take care of them. The government's not going to take care of them. The only thing the government's going to do is take them, and before long, they're going to be just like the Russian people was 10 years ago. If you don't do this, we send you over there. We take your kids and do this and do that. I mean, it's a common thing. You know, anybody can look at it and see it.
There's new equipment coming in.
As far as governments are concerned, government's big business. It's probably the biggest business when you get right down to it. Government is big business, so expect it to react like business. It will take care of itself before it'll take care of you. Government will feed itself before it feeds you.
Yeah, a lot of people, senators or whatever, they make a career out of the government, and we pay, the American people pay for their livelihood.
Free Republic, a conservative online forum, and Judicial Watch, an independent public interest organization, they were joining together on July 24th at a rally in the nation's capital.
Massacre where they ran over the Chinese people with tanks.
You see, it's not a question of left, right, or center. It is a question of our country. It is a question of our love of this nation, of doing what is right, of not mouthing the words that the White House puts in your mouth or the Republican Party puts in your mouth, but saying what is good for this country.
What seems to be in shortest supply is a number of people willing to concentrate on just one thing, which is in some ways the only thing that we need in the way of leadership in this country today, and it's the one thing that it's hardest to get. People who are willing, regardless of the cost and consequences, simply to concentrate upon seeking and finding and telling the truth to the American people.
And now we have an administration that is proud to say it substitutes deniability for accountability and considers that to be clever, and has replaced the word truthfulness with the word credible, where credible now is the chance you have of getting away with a reiterated, planned and configured damn lie.
We have politicians who are more interested in manipulation than they are in service, who have as their main goal making sure they get and keep their positions of power. and who are therefore every day simply trying to figure out, what do I have to say to these folks to get them to keep voting? It doesn't matter if it's the truth. Doesn't matter if it reflects what is on their minds and hearts. Doesn't matter if it is good for this country. They will tell whatever lies they have to tell. They might occasionally even tell the truth if it'll serve their purposes. But probably not. Because after all, if you tell the truth, it binds you thereafter. If you tell a lie, you can always tell another one the day after. But what are the consequences of this era of lies?
Points are awarded and credit is given by my profession to its undying shame every day to those who pass that test of credibility. How plausible are they when they lie? How electable does it make them? And then adding, how much money have they got? And have degraded us below the level of a banana republic by making the lie and the war chest the only test for a public official in these United States.
It's understood by most people who are prominent celebrities that the media is you can't trust them, and it's managed. The amazing thing to me is as you switch channels at night, say the 4 or 5 major networks, you get the same 5 or 6 stories from the same viewpoint on all the channels. You used to think, gee, it'd be competitive, that each one would try to scoop the other, but that's naive. That they're the news in this country is very well managed. I had an opportunity years ago to have lunch with Otto von Habsburg, whose father ruled Europe until the end of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and he's a member of the European Parliament. But at that luncheon that we were at, a group of us were meeting with him, he made 2 remarks to us that were very provocative at the time to me. He made one remark, echoed in my ear. He says, "The ignorance in America is overwhelming." Now, I knew what he meant about that one because I was always startled when I went to my London office in those days. I was amazed at how the local staff knew all about the elections in California, more than I did. They really follow current events. It seems as if the #1 hobby in Europe is current events worldwide, not just in Europe. And it used to embarrass me because I myself wasn't that well informed about some of our local issues. So I knew what he meant, that Americans, all they care is what were the ball scores last week and not what's really going on in the world. But the second remark he made, I didn't understand at the time. That's why it echoes in my ears. He says the concentration of power in America is frightening. When he made that remark at the time, I didn't understand it. And since then, I think I understand what he means. There was, about 15 years ago, there were 2,200 independent newspapers in the United States. And today, all but 5% are owned by just a small number of families. The concentration of power in the media is really terrifying. And coupled with that, especially with television, coupled with that, the media takes pride in its ability to form opinion rather than to inform the electorate.
I believe at the root of that indifference is the same as the root of that passivity, that lack of activism in the reclaiming of our rights, which leaves us now in a position to be despoiled of them.
New York City. Rumored to be approaching police state status, we stopped in to catch up on friends, events, and a little downtime.
Well, do you think that it's like more terrorist because it's 1999 or?
No comment whatsoever.
Oh, you're not?
Anything that you want to ask me.
Oh, really? Oh, really? Okay, well, thank you very much then. Do you get bored here?
No comment.
Can you answer any questions? Are you on City Hall duty also?
Yes.
Oh. So you can't answer any questions?
Oh, no.
Okay, so here we are in front of City Hall, where, as you can see behind me, there's all sorts of yellow and orange tape, and we can't go up, we can't go in. But anyway, nobody's talking. And, as usual, New Yorkers don't really seem to care.
Gosh, what is it?
Do you live here in New York City, sir?
I do.
And I would like to know, how do you feel feel about the fact that you cannot walk up the steps of City Hall?
I take it in stride. I think it's, part of all the construction that's going on.
But they had this shut down before for terrorists, remember? That's
Yes.
why they initially put it up. And then what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's pretty ugly looking, but I think eventually maybe it'll look attractive. But in the meantime, it's a real eyesore, considering that this is the height of the tourist season.
So aesthetically is what displeases you the most?
Right.
Because you were probably going to go up there anyway.
I mean, I really don't care about the politics or the access issue, but it offends me aesthetically as a New Yorker.
The fact, sir, that you cannot walk up the steps of City Hall.
Well, they did this barricade because of fear of terrorists.
Right.
Because of what happened with the World Trade, they felt that terrorists could walk in, plant a bomb in there.
Just a scheme by the Giuliani administration to keep protesters and people that don't agree with them away.
I find it mildly interesting that you can't walk up these steps into the building any longer.
I think it's disgraceful.
Do you?
Absolutely. And it's typical Rudy Giuliani. I think it's Fort Giuliani, isn't it?
Yes.
You can't get in there.
No, I can't. And they also cannot answer any questions.
Well, why should they answer any questions? How do you know the answer anyway? You're a member of the public. Why should you know?
I know.
Police department, you understand, we're in a police state right now.
I don't have much stock in government, so I'm an anarchist.
I feel like, you understand, the cops, you understand, are doing things beyond the cause of duty that they shouldn't have to do, you understand, to keep you from having a good time in this city. This city is not New York no more. And it never will be New York no more with this government that we got running it right now.
I'm distrustful. I'm not a paranoid person. I don't believe in conspiracies, but I think everything is a huge smokescreen. And I'm totally skeptical about anything that comes out in the media. I don't think there's any difference really in any of the political parties.
We have a greater slavery going on now than we've ever had in the South. Something I've fought hard for, worked hard for to get out of a different situation in the South. All of a sudden, you understand, here's 1999, we're in the same situation we did, you understand, in the 1960s.
And I think that we need to stick together. You know what I'm saying? Stick together, work together and live in happiness and harmony instead of killing each other and fighting each other all the time.
Are we angry? Why should we be angry? We're making $10 million a fucking year playing basketball. We're making $13 million playing baseball. Why should we be angry?
Us as black people, be able to work together is not really working out.
With thousands of years of wisdom, well, they say in the I Ching, corruption starts in the head of a rotting fish.
White man don't run this country more. The white man have lost his throne. He don't run this country no more. He got other race of people running this country. He sells this country.
It's like Machiavelli's book, Prince. I think governments scramble people so badly and exhaust them that the average citizen, taken in New York City, they're so distressed just working or trying to put food on the table. They have no time to communicate with each other.
We getting weaker and weaker every day. Not by nobody else destroying us, but by us destroying ourselves.
In 1999, the unthinkable happened. Stories were hinted at and printed up that gave credence, albeit grudgingly and reluctantly, to many years of claims by conspiracy theorists, thereby making them, for the first time in the mainstream, conspiracy factualists. We didn't know how much would eventually come out this year. However, we did know that in Waco, Texas, 86 Americans burned to death under dubious circumstances and splintering cover-ups, and that we had been led to believe that they deserved it.
These are David Crush's underground rooms. He was telling the people a year in advance the government would come and kill him, and he was building underground as fast as he could. There's remaining foundation in this area. At the front of the remaining foundation is an underground room that was under the building itself. It took us 4 years to find the escape tunnels coming out of that room because there was a deliberate effort to conceal them, I think. The doorways to the tunnels were cemented shut and the room was lined with plywood like there weren't any doorways.
Yeah, the 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us in Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel? Yeah, tell them they're children and women.
Sun has become a 1999 story, so I just want to ask what you think if the truth will actually come out now about Waco.
Well, if the truth doesn't, it's over. I think it's high time that we recognize the criminalization of the executive branch in general. And I think that it's high time we had some accountability. When that was all going on, I remember vividly that Janet Reno assuming responsibility before the cameras. Okay, let's let her be responsible. We have over 80 Americans that were deliberately murdered by the U.S. government. The evidence is there.
We must understand that not one agent who was at the raid on the scene on the 28th made a written report of it. That's highly irregular. On March the 1st, the ATF initiates a shooting review. Johnston, the assistant United States attorney, advised Hartnett to stop the ATF shooting review because ATF was creating Brady material. Brady material, ladies and gentlemen, is information that might tend to show that someone accused is innocent. They try to explain this to say, well, that just meant, you know, we don't want to, compromise the prosecution. You don't want to compromise the prosecution by revealing evidence that might tend to show that somebody is not guilty of the charges? Well, that's not where we are in this country, I hope.
There's never been accountability at Waco, and not only was it a bungled thing by the ATF, the cover-ups, that to me is as scary a crime as the event itself.
What could be called an infantry tank maneuver. We notice the tank, this is the tank smashing into the building. And we'll also see gunfire, multiple gunfire, on the outside of the tank to the rear of the tank. Right now we're seeing a close-up view of exactly the same thing. The important thing to notice is the gunfire, multiple rounds being fired from at least two different positions. And it's about 10 bursts in approximately 2 to 3 seconds. And according to our calculations, it indicates that both positions are firing automatic weapons.
There needs to be, somewhere along the way, one would hope that, these things will be, that truth will be served.
Koresh's survivors number around 35.
But that were in the building?
9 people came out of the fire.
9.
Yeah, a lot of them are serving 40 years, 25 years.
Oh.
They mostly went to jail to become political prisoners.
I think part of the problem is that there aren't any clean hands to go after this. You know, there isn't an Elliot Ness or whatever to get into the act. But the corruption is so widespread on both sides of the aisle.
What may perhaps be perceived as a mild irony to my passionate quest for truth, justice, and the American way is that, well, I'm an immigrant.
And as we were coming into New York Harbor, early in the morning, about 6 o'clock, we passed by the Statue of Liberty. And as importantly, we passed by Ellis Island. And I thought to myself, and I choked up, that I was going to be here today speaking to you. Because we are all the descendants of immigrants from Europe and the rest of the world. And I thought of my grandparents who passed through Ellis Island back in the early part of the 20th century and what they expected of this country. People who fled the communist regime in Russia, tyranny in Poland, Lithuania, Latvia.
All right, obviously, being Canadian, I didn't come here escaping persecution.
Partly because I'm an immigrant to these shores, as perhaps some of you can tell, I'm not native, that I have a sense of a desecration. Sometimes immigrants are more reverent about the old country than those who were lucky enough to be born here and to take a constitution and a Bill of Rights as their birthright, which I was not.
To me, truth by its definition is narrow. Is it really out there? Is it knowable to the common man? And in the end, is it worth whatever the accompanying costs to seek it out?
I'm not egotistical enough to think that our Creator, call him what you want to, created this. We don't even see the end of what the universe is.
I'm trying to stay with the nuts and bolts end of it. I don't want to get into meaning or origin.
It would seem to me unreasonable to believe that we're alone here in this vast, so vast it's incomparable to the human mind, this vast universe.
There's too many billions of suns out there that have planets going around them that could be comparable to ours to not say some sort of intelligent life exists.
Two of us here have reasons to believe that attended the last international conference on the origin of life. And the thing we noticed was just the atmosphere of pessimism amongst the non-theists, that there is no way to explain the origin of life. We now know it happened rapidly on planet Earth, that it happens rapidly with oxygen present, then there's no possibility of a natural explanation. You're forced to concede that it must be supernatural. So the fact that even secular researchers are recognizing that this can't be done, in fact some have speculated, we know it's impossible on Earth, it must have happened somewhere in outer space and came to planet Earth by some transport mechanism.
There's a lot of theories now that, yeah, the aliens came here 5,000 years ago and started all this.
The problem with that is we know the panspermia theory only works over interplanetary distances. You cannot take life material from a star and get it to Earth in any form that would be recognizable beyond carbon dioxide or hydrogen cyanide. It's just not going to happen. The radiation that's necessary to move that stuff is so intense it'll break it down.
Do I believe there are aliens? Hell yes. Do I believe they visited here? Probably, no doubt. Do I believe that we're the descendants of aliens? Absolutely.
What is the possibility of finding a planet like Earth with the capacity to support life if you don't invoke the Creator God of the Bible? And it's easy to determine that the odds are less than 1 in 10 to the 109 of finding a solar system like ours that can support life. When you look at the universe, we have less than 1 chance in 10 in the 120th that you're going to get even the cosmological constant at the right value to support life. Or the mass density of the universe must be fine-tuned within 1 part from 10 to the 16th.
The whole UFO thing and alien thing is sort of a strange area. It's a very difficult area to research because there's so much nonsense. Some of it just silliness, a lot of it well-funded disinformation. That's in fact, part of the mystery in that area is why, because it's not self-recovering funding.
There's too many people to see them. I had a sighting one night, yes, right out north of town. Friends of mine called me at 11 o'clock at night, and all I can tell you, what I saw, it was unusual.
But the one thing you do know about it is that I think it's 13 of our astronauts confirmed the reality of UFOs, etc. So the point is, it's not the myth or fiction that some people presume. As you get in this, you discover there is a reality to them.
It was a thing like this right up in that north sky, and it was, your naked eye, you could see it. And with binoculars, you could get it more details.
Because they do show up on multiple radars simultaneously. On the one hand, so they're real, they're tangible. The radar sets don't have hallucinations. On the other hand, they violate physical laws.
So a deputy sheriff and I stood there with our elbows on the top of the car looking at that thing, and we talked back and forth what it was doing. While we were there, another one the same size came up and hung up there beside it like this. And then it was there all 15 or 20 minutes, and then it moved off slowly to the northeast. This one didn't move. We spotted it with stars. It didn't move.
They appear to be massless in many respects. And so that's why most scientists that have gotten serious about this have come to the conclusion they're hyperdimensional somehow.
It wasn't a balloon, or it moved. It wasn't an airplane, it couldn't have stood still.
And the term that they use is demonic.
So what was it?
But it's interesting that Dr. John Mack, who's was the head of psychiatry for Harvard, and shocked, he personally has dealt with these abduction stories. I think 76 cases personally and so forth, and he co-chaired the conference at MIT on the whole abduction thing. And he shocked the psychiatric world by coming out and expressing his view that these beings are real and that they have an agenda to create a hybrid. And a lot of people are upset with him with that because that's not very in today to have that view. But his book Abductions deals with his views on this pretty graphically. So I don't know how much credibility he put in that. I don't know the man personally, but I do. He has contributed to 150 peer-reviewed medical journals. He's got a Pulitzer Prize in his background. He's not to be dismissed lightly. and yet he believes that there's a very, very real something going on.
What do you think about aliens?
I don't think there are any. At one time, I thought that there were, simply based upon documents that I'd seen while I was attached to the intelligence briefing team, the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet. At that time, and even for many years afterwards, I did not believe that the government would use me in that way. I had devoted my whole life to government service. I had been in the Air Force, I was in the Navy, I was a river patrol boat captain in Vietnam, I had proved myself, I had combat ribbons with the V for Valor. There was no doubt of my loyalty to my country. And maybe that's why it was so easy to use me, because I wouldn't doubt that what I saw was real. But over the years, I've done a lot of research. And what I've discovered is there's no proof existing anywhere that extraterrestrials are real, or that have ever visited this planet, or that they exist anywhere in the universe. There is not one shred of evidence anywhere. There is lots of evidence, tons of it in fact, that there are a group of people collectively known as the Illuminati who want us to believe in some extraterrestrial threat from space so that they can cause a world government, bringing together of all the people to resist that external threat. The first time that I saw any reference to that, I was reading some papers from the Carnegie Endowment Fund, and there was a record of a speech. It was a dinner for Viscount Ishii of the Japanese delegation, the Japanese Imperial delegation, in 1917. And John Dewey was one of the speakers. And the first sentence out of his mouth, as I was reading this, I almost fell out of my chair, because this was in 1917, and he said the best way to cause all the people of the world to come together in one world government and end war forever would be if we were attacked by some other species from some other planet. And boy, that just clicked with me, and I knew that that this is just another scam. This is the age of deception. There's no doubt about it. And then 8 times during Reagan's administration, he inserted almost the exact same phrase into 8 of his speeches. And it's a scam. That's what I can tell you. What they call UFOs, these craft that fly around the sky, are real. But they're not piloted by some little green guy from some other planet. They're owned and operated by the United States of America for one, the Soviet Union for another, probably Great Britain, Canada. I think the first really operable ones were probably manufactured in Western Canada, in the wilderness, in a place especially built to create those machines, like we created the Manhattan Project, and the same kind of secrecy surrounded it. So the technology is real. It's been kept secret, and it's been used to promote this concept that there's an alien threat to this earth. The cattle mutilations I've discovered in my research are nothing more than what's left after the government does its secret tests on the low-level radiation leakage from its atomic weapons assembly plants and atomic power plants. It's a low-level radiation monitoring project. And if you look at what's missing on the cattle, you'll see that it's just as clear as day. They take the lips, they take the tongue, they take a 6-inch patch of skin, they core out the rectum, the colon area, where those kinds of things would collect. They pass through the digestive system. On female cows, they take the udder to check for low-level radiation in the milk. This is being passed to the calves. And these are all grazing animals that graze on the grass where the radiation falls when it falls from the air. And it's just an incredible deception. And I'm just amazed that people have fallen for it in the manner that they have in the absence of any proof whatsoever. I mean, they cite hearsay as proof.
Well, what about all of the alien abductions?
They're not abductions. They're the results of a tremendously successful and very sophisticated mind control operation, all of which has been in development Well, they started working on those kinds of things since before World War II. But they have perfected them. On my website, I have a patent of a machine that can read your brain waves, can recombine them in a computer and send them back to you and make you think things happened that never happened. I mean, you can't get a patent for something like that unless it really works. You have to prove it to the patent office. It works. A patent was issued. And this is just one of the things that snuck by them that hasn't, because when people invent things like this, they're sucked up by the government immediately, and then they're put behind the veil of national security and classified, and then nobody knows about them. But every once in a while, something sneaks by them. And when you do these searches in the patent office, and the trademark office, and in the copyright office, you come up with some real gems once in a while, and that was one. Also, the congressional investigations into the intelligence community has revealed the existence of these programs, and there's no secret about it. It's documented. Project Artichoke, Project MK Ultra, MK Naomi. You know, I could go on and on and on all day long, and you know, if you had the time in your movie, we could lay out all the documentation, which is official government documentation, and prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that it's true. But that's what it is. It's not extraterrestrials coming down. The human body cannot pass through walls or roofs, or through windows that are closed. You know, this is all the product of the imagination and people's willingness to believe something because they want it to be true. I don't know why they would want it to be true. You see, because if it were true, these are not friendly aliens. They're doing some terrible things to people. If I were to kidnap somebody, pass them up through the roof, and take them somewhere, and perform operations on them, and take samples of semen and ova from their, you know, reproductive organs, and plant thoughts in their mind, and all this kind of stuff, and then bring them back, guess where I'd be right now? In prison. It's kidnapping. It's criminal. It's a terrible thing. So there's a morbid sense about all this too, as if people want to be hurt for some reason. I don't understand that, but that certainly is something that somebody needs to look at. Why do people feel that this needs to be real? What in them says, I want to be abducted and abused and kidnapped and raped and all of this stuff against my will? Because they seem to take some kind of satisfaction that this is happening. And nobody's talking about the fact that this is a terrible thing to happen. If I were to do that to you, you wouldn't be too happy, would you? But somehow it's okay if an alien does it? I don't think so. It's all bullshit. It's a lie. And it's...
So where do you feel the hope for America lies? Oh, this is William Cooper, a man who received mainstream attention in 1994 when Rush Limbaugh read an alleged White House memo on the air calling him the most dangerous radio host in America. Maybe that's because his conspiracy classic is the underground bestseller, or perhaps it's because of the increasing popularity of his shortwave radio broadcast, which is also available on the internet.
Good evening. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm still William Cooper.
This was not an easy interview to net. He was the first person I asked, and after 8,000 miles and 6.5 weeks on the road, just about the last to agree. I guess he wanted to make sure I was serious. Nevertheless, I had to come alone, and I was required to follow clear rules of conduct.
Well, at this point, I've done so much research on this. I have to tell you, there's only one way this is going. There's going to be a civil war in this country. And I hope the outcome of the war will be the reinstatement of constitutional Republican government. But whenever you have a war like that, you're going to have competing factions to be the winner. And whoever really has the power in the end is going to institute whatever kind of government they feel should be there. There are people in this country who believe that a religious theology or theocracy should prevail. Well, if that happened, we'd have burnings at the stake again, and inquisitions, and heretics and all of these kinds of things. So that can't be allowed to happen. Can't be. Doesn't matter what my religion is. It can't be allowed to happen. There are people who want a socialist government, much like the one in Sweden. There are people who want to create in the United States what the Soviet Union had hoped to be. There are real Nazis, all of them socialists. Hitler was a socialist. So I see the future as being tremendously dangerous for all of us. Me and many others like me are going to perform a valiant attempt to reinstate, restore legitimate, lawful, constitutional Republican government. Whether or not we're going to be successful, I can't tell you. But I will tell you that once this war starts, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be bloody, and it'll last for 10 or 15 years. That's the nature of this kind of conflict. If you look around at all these mountains around here, there's enough guns, ammunition, supplies, clothing, and food buried in these mountains to support an army for 15 years. And I don't think the American people realize that they're on the brink of a civil war. You see, there are many of us who took an oath when we went in the armed forces, and we meant it. We volunteered. We weren't drafted. We care about this country. And the oath was to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we will fulfill that oath, even if it means we die in the process of doing it. It's that simple.
I started out as a young man by joining the U.S. Air Force. And I spent over 20 years in the Air Force. Of course, I believe that is a great service.
I've joined the Marine Corps. In 1962, I volunteered for the Marine Corps.
I wanted to serve the United States, to be patriotic.
They ask you if you belong to any organization, such as the Ku Klux Klan or anything like that, anything, the Mafia, if anything foreign to your, or if you're a communist, if it's foreign to your country, and you either answer yes or no. If you answer yes, they put you out. If you answer no, they swear you in. You take allegiance to your Constitution of the United States to protect your country with your life.
Let me tell you this, all of you, all across the nation and around the world, patriots are everywhere. By patriots, I mean men and women who serve freedom. We're ready and willing to die for freedom should they ever be called upon to have to do that.
What do you think about Y2K?
Just another Happy New Year. It's a random number picked by man. Hey, ask a Jew. It's not the Y2K.
The majority of the people on this planet are running on calendars that aren't anywhere near the year 2000. Chinese, Hebrews, so yeah, we're kind of the exception.
Well, we passed the 999 test yesterday, not one ripple. So that's going to make it really hard to push a Y2K disaster scenario. Tests were made as frequently or as far back as 12 months ago. October 98 is when you should have seen the first ripple of it, and nothing happened. Nothing happened on January 1 of 99. That should have been another big disaster point. And we passed another one yesterday. And you get all the banks and government agencies saying they're ready. All the utilities say they're ready. So
People say to me, well, you said things about Y2K Texe. If it doesn't come, it's not a great big horrible catastrophe. We're going to call you a false prophet. But I've never said, and I never would, that Y2K is in all.
Well, Millennium Fever this time around is a lot less than it was when we turned 1,000. So I expected there'd be a lot more millennial fever along the lines of other kinds of scenarios, like the lineup of planets or whatever, or some big disaster about to strike the Earth from outer space. And I'm amazed there isn't that much of that going on.
About Y2K.
You second me. You second me. Thank you very much.
What do you think about Y2K?
Yeah, it's very nice, very good.
I think America has always been a very tolerant nation. I mean, we had the Great Depression, and people were put out of work in droves, people went hungry, there was no revolution. The American people seem to be eternally optimistic.
We're preaching the 6,000 years of sin that precede the 1,000-year millennium kingdom. It's a sabbatical from sin. And according to my great-grandfather's Bible, that 6,000 years ended in 1996. That's using Ussher's dating method, and he was a Congregationalist minister. He had a great, huge minister's Bible, 1888, and it gave 4004 as the date of creation using Ussher's dating method. They date all the kings, you know. And so that places us squarely at the time of setting up the kingdom of God on earth, and it seems to be millennial fever is appropriate.
Well, that's our question. Is it millennial fever or is it justified heightened awareness?
Well, justified heightened awareness. I think God is making a lot of things happen so that people wake up and realize that, for instance, America is not a perfect country, you know, and the Branch Davidian massacre and the Ruby Ridge and the Oklahoma bombing are all telling the same story. Wake up, America.
So what do you see happening in the next 4 to 6 months in this
Well,
country?
I don't have a crystal ball. All I know is that the year 2000 is crucial to the plans of those who want world government, because they whipped up sort of a millennium fever, and they've coupled that with Y2K and a whole bunch of other things. Real religious people who think that this is the end of the world and Jesus is coming or somebody's coming imminently. And so there's this fever that's whipped up. I mean, everybody seems to be on the edge of some kind of hysteria, but it's all in their mind. If you look around, you see the world hasn't changed. It's not coming to an end. This hasn't been brought about by the hand of God. It's been brought about by the deceptions of man. And the quicker people realize that and try and find out who is causing these things to whip up this hysteria, the better off they're going to be.
Hi, this is Isaac Hayes. I want to see you around for the next millennium, and I don't want you to get the shaft. So, fasten your seatbelt for safety.
Dad, I need my seatbelt.
We cannot escape the truth that a people who have surrendered its character is a people in the end who will surrender its liberty and its security.
The freest societies are the ones that collapse the hardest. If you look back throughout history. The ones that really collapse the hardest and the fastest.
But the free in what sense?
The freest societies, the freest to let people run around and do as they want, act as they want, say what they want, give them anything they need. These are the ones that throughout history have reached a pinnacle of greatness and then bang, crashed almost overnight.
In societies that didn't have a moral center.
I gotta hate that.
I know you do.
But to a degree, yes. The family unit. God, I'm starting to sound like Gore. The family unit is gone. You know, my great memories and the things I miss the most about family were like every morning the family sat down at the breakfast table. We ate breakfast together. We talked. Of course, Dad made enough money to where Mom stayed home and rent a house. You know, you could do that in those days. You can't do that anymore. Lunch, of course, was a different story. But evening time, it wasn't formal, but it was, by today's standards, probably a formal meal. You know, the china was laid out on the table. Everybody had their place and set. Meal was served. You don't see that anymore. I think the greatest spot was the dinner table for a family. That's where families were formed. That's where the learning occurred. That's where the social structure developed. That's where the moral parameters were established. In my family, that didn't mean it was rigid. We were always encouraged to find our own, because my father was the first to tell you that the morals of what somebody else decided was right for you. And only you can answer the truth for them. However, the idea was there. You don't have it. You have real fractured, loose concepts of family. Everybody on their own, everybody doing their own thing. Where do you learn? How do you learn values? By whatever schmuck on the street takes you under their wing for whatever purpose. You know, mothers, be careful. Teach your kids because they come to me. I'll take advantage of it. I have no doubt that I will take advantage anytime I can. Because they make it so fucking easy. That's why.
If you don't teach your kids at home, somebody in the streets will teach you.
I think that we are very much in the position of those ancient cities and republics that waxed fat and soft until they were finally destroyed by barbarian enemies. We will not sustain our liberty if we do not sustain the character that makes us free.
I can remember when I was in school, and almost every 4th of July we had to write a little essay, what it means to be an American. And it was a boring thing, it was predictable, we had to go through that silly exercise, go through it because it seemed so obvious. I don't think there's probably one person in 20 that I know that could tell me in writing what it does mean to be an American. What's unique about it being American? It's not a democracy. We're not the first or the last. What makes us unique to be an American? There's a whole issue there of the values, you know, and you go right back to the Declaration of Independence, the rest, you know, our creator, inalienable rights, the whole basis, our whole concept of government was unique.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, they said, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights.
When the Constitutional Convention adjourned,
As old Mr. Benjamin Franklin was leaving that meeting house in Philadelphia,
and they were coming out, some woman apparently, I gather,
I used to know her name. It was a Scottish name. I don't have it in my head just at the moment.
asked Ben Franklin, "What kind of government have you given us?"
And he said, "Well, madam, a republic. If you can keep it."
We don't have a government like other people that just evolved through history. We have a government that was designed prayerfully by geniuses.
I've seen the best and worst that they've all got to offer, and this is the finest government and operating system for a government I've ever seen anywhere in the world. No one else can come even close to it.
And it has stood well for the better part of 2 centuries. That now we've abandoned. We've let the revisionists strip our heritage away, and it's tragic.
If we were as strong and as wise and as wonderful as some people try to claim we are because of our technological advances and all this, then we wouldn't have spent the last 50 and 60 years destroying our liberties. We would have been wiser and we would have been stronger than that.
What had happened at Columbine made everyone start thinking that we need to start straightening up our world, or else this is what we're going to wind up being. It's just a crooked world like that.
What do you think about Y2K?
It's a good thing.
Can we ask you a question, sir?
Yes.
Hamlet, go ahead, ask.
What do you think about Y2K?
Y2K? Well, I think that's, that just proved the man is not so wise as they say he is. But, there is God in heaven who is wiser, and he loves you. He sent his son Jesus to die for you, that you may live forever.
God bless you, sir.
Back in California, I reflect on several things. The people we met, the things they said, and who they really might be. Are they lunatics, liars, or heroes?